Okay, my friends, here we are for another video. This is the third part in a series I'm doing on, basically, I call it how the God of Atheism, part 3, just died. Well, actually, he's been dead for a long time. But anyway, in the first part, we looked at the quantum level of matter, and we discovered something very interesting. We went down what they call a rabbit hole. Of course, in school, they taught you about... First of all, they taught you about, molecules, and then atoms, and then, protons, neutrons, and electrons, and then they've come down to, fundamental particles, electrons being one of them. But we also found out, unfortunately for the materialist, that basically particles don't exist. Previously, we talked about how dark energy makes up 70% of the universe, dark matter makes up 25%, and they say the scientists were claiming that they understand what makes up 5% of our universe. Well, my claim was in part 1 that we don't even know what makes up the 5%. They've gone down the rabbit hole so far that they found out that the particles themselves don't really exist. They're made up of 20 lines of fluctuating forces and energy and strings, and again, they don't know where that comes from. They have no idea. Then we continued our search. In the second one, we went more to a macro level as far as the universe goes, and one of the saviors for the materialist was the multiverse, and we discussed that in quite a bit, and the fine-tuning of the universe. And in number 2, we found out, because of the fine-tuning of the universe, the very reasons that the atheist proposes that there is a multiverse. He needs to propose there is a multiverse, because if there isn't a multiverse, and if, like Gerhard Hofft said, there is only one universe, then there is no multiverse, and the chances of even things like abiogenesis are so unlikely to happen that they didn't happen. In fact, the very reasons that they use an excuse to propose the multiverse is the very same reasons why the multiverse is not science in 2022. Now, I've debated atheists, and there's a video. Alan Guth says we might know in 100 years whether or not it's true. Well, okay, I don't have time to wait 100 years. Don't know about you, but I'm not going to be around for the next 100 years. So we have to make an educated guess. Does God exist or not? Well, the evidence, good for me as a theist, keeps mounting that God does exist. Well, in this last one, we're going to go back to the quantum level. We're going to talk about quantum mechanics and in terms of information. Now, in this secular science video, what I really hope, what I want you to do is don't get too bogged down on trying to understand all of the science exactly. Just pick up the concepts. What are they talking about? What is it that they're talking about? And as they're talking, as you're listening, and if you want to, of course, you could, watch it several times, but I'll explain it on the other side in more detail, just to pull out the nuances. But what I want you to get in your head is, from what they're discussing, does it come from mind or no mind? Does it come from mind or no mind? Okay? So, without further ado, let's watch the video.
You have to use the power of mathematics and experiment and observation to peer deeper into the true nature of reality when things are beyond our direct sensory experience. And that's what quantum mechanics is all about. It's trying to describe what happens in the micro world in a way that's both accurate and revealing. And the thing to bear in mind is, even though our focus here tonight will really, in some sense, be in the micro world, the world of particles, we are all collections of particles. So any weirdness that we find down there in the micro world, in some sense, it has an impact even in the macro world. It may be suppressed, as we'll discuss, but it's not like there's a sharp divide between the small and the big. We are big beings made of a lot of small things, so any weirdness about the small stuff really does apply to us as well. Which is simply this: if something falls into a black hole, what happens to the information that it contained, right? So to just be concrete, Imagine I was to take out my wallet and throw it into a black hole. My wallet has all sorts of information, credit card information. Oh, there it is. They took it out of my pocket. They throw it into the black hole. It crosses over the horizon, the edge that Mark was referring to. And at least in the non-quantum, the classical description, it's just gone, right? And you can think that the information is sort of maybe still there. It's just on the other side. We can't get at it unless we go in. But if we do that, there are consequences. We can't come back out with the information. So that's sort of the classical story. This becomes a really big puzzle and a bigger puzzle when we include quantum mechanics.
Again, it's quantum mechanics, but again, there is a theory underlying quantum mechanics which is more precise and which should provide the missing information. And yes, there was missing information, and yes, your wallet does leave an imprint on the radiation coming out.
So can we show...
because your wallet, yes, if you want to have a moment, your wallet carries a gravitational field. Even though it's very light compared to a planet or a star, it does have gravity. That gravity is sufficient to leave a very minute imprint on the outgoing particles.
So we sort of see that imprint here of my wallet on the edge of the black hole.
The effect of this is that the information gets stuck on the horizon of a black hole.
We just show that one again.
Ready to come out again in the form of the Hawking particles.
Right.
And this, in principle, you can compute, and you find that the culprit is the gravitational field of your wallet. That many people forget to take into account. And then you get a tremendous problem. You don't understand how can it be that all those dollars and credit cards in your wallet, that information gets out. Well, a normal person will never be able to identify, to decompose Hawking radiation and get back to your wallet.
So they won't be able to do this.
It's a better shredder you'll never find anywhere.
Right.
But even the shredder still contains the information.
Right. So people won't actually be able to do this, reconstruct my wallet, but in principle, just like with the shredder, in principle they would be able to do that. So this is an idea that you developed also with Lenny Susskind, which gives rise to what we call the holographic principle, the holographic description. Again, because if information is stored on a thin surface at the edge of the black hole, it sort of brings to mind a hologram, which is a thin piece of plastic, which has etchings on it. When you illuminate it correctly, it yields a three-dimensional entity. Here, you've got information on this thin two-dimensional surface, which is able to reconstruct the object that went in, and that's why this word holography is used. This is sort of a deep insight which has been generalized. People, Gerard and Lenny and others, think that perhaps the right way of thinking about the universe, any environment, even right here on Earth, there's a description where data exists on a thin two-dimensional bounding surface, which would make us the holographic projections, using this language, of this information that exists on a thin surface that you wouldn't think would even have the capacity to store enough information to make it adequate to describe all the comings and goings in this three-dimensional realm.
So, what I wanted you to get, that the last part of that video is very important, because he's talking about taking the information that they learned from the black hole, the things that the black hole does to the wallet, and they're generalizing it to the entire universe, that we're a holographic projection, that we're a hologram of some sort. So, again, it doesn't matter if you understand all the scientific concepts. That's not what's important. You can watch the video several times if you want to get more out of it. But I want you to listen to their basic terms, what they're talking about, using, quote, the power of mathematics, experimentation, and observation to describe our reality, quote, and that the information is stored on the thin surface of a black hole. Or, as he showed in the video, they had the picture of the world, and then on a, thin layer, 2D layer, the information projecting the entire universe, projecting our world at the time, but he talked about projecting our entire universe. But it's stored on a very thin layer, like he said, that you wouldn't think would have the capacity to do that. But it's a holographic description. So what does that mean about our universe? So at the quantum level, what is the unmitigated implication of these ideas put forth by the panel scientists. Think about it in terms of the first thing I told you to remember, mind or no mind. Question, what is more reasonable to believe? What's more reasonable to believe? What is more probable to believe about that? Now, I much prefer the term probable versus possible. Why is that? Atheists, evolutionists, materialists, they love the possible. They love the possible. But boy, they really can't stand it when you bring up the probable. Well, what's the probability of that happening? What's the probability of abiogenesis, the first life coming about by chance, which I've discussed before? What's the probability of that? What's the probability of our universe being built on information? What is more logical to believe? Agency? Or nothing, chance, and time created first a 2D world somehow, and then and that 2D world, the information contained in that 2D world basically, could informationally code for and express our 3D reality. I mean, it's the ultimate chicken and the egg problem. Not even a wallet that's thrown into a black hole is lost. The information's still there. Down to the credit cards, etc. And again, Brian Greene, he brought this up at the beginning. We use mathematics to peer into the quantum world. Well, there's something wrong with bringing up physical laws, mathematical laws, logical laws, and then saying with the other breath that everything was randomly generated in this universe. The universe itself was randomly generated by a randomly generating multiverse machine out there somewhere. Well, where did the randomly generating multiverse machine come from? We don't know. But we believe, I'm talking as a materialist atheist right now, we believe it's eternal because we believe in eternal inflation, etc. But please give me a reasonable explanation for that. When in fact, we can describe our reality in mathematical terms. Now, watch this next video clip of this very young physicist, what he has to say. It's very interesting.
I mean, it's wonderful and mysterious why mathematics works so well to describe our universe at all. Our physical laws, the fact that they're accessible to us, and that some fundamental bits of mathematics actually describe our physical world, that's really remarkable. Like we're living in a bit of mathematics that's come to life.
Man, that is something. We're living in a bit of mathematics that has come to life. Doesn't sound random to me. Mathematics is not random. Mathematics is very precise. And why, again, can we do such mathematical equations and bring, all the way down to the quantum level and describe the reality even at the quantum level, and we can use mathematics to do it? All reality seems to be informational. In fact, all reality seems to be informational and mathematical. In fact, it's the information that makes our hologram reality possible. So please explain in a reasonable way how information could possibly be a requirement and a prerequisite for our existence in a universe that's supposedly random, that's supposedly generated random life. It really fascinates me, seriously, the lengths that atheists and materialists have to go through these days to deny what's staring them right in the face. If information is the key to reality, and it is, if information is foundational to all reality, and it is, and if mathematics is fundamental to all reality, and it is, and if laws of logic are fundamental to reality, and they are, that's amazing. That's absolutely, unequivocally astonishing to me. And what's it proof of? The major takeaway from this discussion is that information, and for that matter mathematical laws, what? Must exist first. Interesting. Let me put it this way. How does information work? Well, usually you describe something by information and then you generate it. The coding always comes first. How do we know that? Well, because the coding in our world comes first. You didn't get life until the code came. Code had to come first. In fact, code is primary. Now, that's not what I was taught. You guys actually teach the opposite in every fashion. But now, listen, we're talking about even the, quote, supposed particles themselves. The God of atheism is created out of data. And that's the way he talked about it. Data comes first. Data. Brian Greene said the data comes first. But again, as I was taught, no, information wasn't first. First you had the random bumping together of particles. And gradually over time you went from simple to complex, then to unimaginably complex. In fact, it's so complex that even with a brain we can't figure it out. And I'm talking about, well, even the universe itself, we don't know where it came from, and we don't know what makes up the universe anymore. And I mean 100% of it. I've already shown that. And we don't know how life began. And when we look at the first life, we look at the first life, what did it have to be? Even Carl Sagan said that the first life had to be able to live on its own. Couldn't be a virus. I heard recently scientists trying to give a virus the benefit of being our first ancestor. But even as Carl Sagan pointed out, the virus can't be our first ancestor. Why? Because a virus requires a host. In fact, what they've been able to discern from a lot of research, viruses, where do viruses come from? From broken DNA. So it's a part of broken DNA. Anyway, I'm going to move on from that. Instead, all of reality, even the universe itself, must have existed and exists as mind first. That's right. All of reality, even the universe itself now, must have existed and exist as mind first. So, as a Christian theist, I've got no problem with these ideas. As a Christian theist, the Bible actually declares that the God of the Bible was able to speak the universe, all creation, into being. But in fact, the actual translation implies that it was a reality of his thoughts, an intents of his heart. And it was telepathically thought. He didn't have to, we think of it as voicing it, because that's what we do. That's how we communicate. I understand the principle, and I understand why they would translate it that way. But the idea is, it was in the mind of God. In fact, we're all from the mind of God. Think of that. Even as a being, I understand if you're not a Christian, if you're not a theist. But you, whoever you are, listen, you are brought here, created here, from the mind of God. And that, in fact, that's what his word says. I know the plans and thoughts I think towards you. In Jeremiah. I know the plans and thoughts I think towards you. Thoughts of your future. Anyway, and God created everything out of his thought pattern. Interesting. Jesus is, see, that's the thing. Jesus is the Word. He is the Word. It's not that he spoke the words, he did, but Jesus is the Word. Jesus is the resurrection, and he is life. Jesus is life. Jesus is the embodiment of truth. He is truth. The Bible says Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is all those things. He is the truth. He is the embodiment of all truth and knowledge in this world. He created you for a reason and a purpose, and he has thoughts towards you. Even if you're not a Christian today, he is thinking, and he's got his mind on you. Think of that. The creator of this universe, who put it all together through just thinking of it, Or it's okay if we can say it. He spoke it into existence. It was in the mind of God. You're in the mind of God. And he brought you here for a reason and has a plan for your life. But the universe was created by, through, and for Christ. And Jesus is the glue, according to Scripture, that holds it all together. Interesting. Now, given what we've learned so far over these 3 episodes, I might have another one to go with this this particular series. What's more reasonable? What's more probable? What's more logical to believe? Mind or no mind? Just given the verbiage, a hologram. Well, what's a hologram? Where do holograms come from? Why, if everything is random and it's nothing but a physical rock out there, quote unquote, why would it need to be even described, or why would there need to be data describing that particular rock or that particular planet going around that particular orbit, around that, inside that particular universe? But think of the computing power it would take. Think of the computing power it would take to do that for the entire universe. Amazing. The God of atheism is the particles. But as we saw in the first episode, particles don't exist. As it said in that first episode, if you were to try and... Okay, an electron is one example of one of the fundamental particles that all matter is made up of. And yet in the video, in the first episode, it talked about how you couldn't take a pair of quantum tweezers and put an electron inside a pair of quantum tweezers because it probably didn't exist. And then in the second episode, we talked about the multiverse, which again, I can leave videos in the description below of Alan Guth saying we might know in 100 years whether the multiverse is true or not. And other scientists, making light of it, like believing in angels or like fairies or something, the way he's talking about it, So, and then the third episode is information. Our universe is built on information, mathematical laws, physical laws. It's built on physics before the particles. Where would that come from? How would that be? How could that possibly not be generated by mind? How is that possible? Well, it isn't. Again, I'm talking about what's more reasonable to believe, what's more probable to believe, what's more logical to believe. Reality was created by the particles, but there was first defined in terms of data in a 2D space before the holographic 3D structure we live in is projected before us. And the most likely explanation of this is mind, eternal mind, which we call God. That's the truth. Have a blessed day.